Thank you, Allison. I have my Twitter handle there if anybody wants to follow along. And if you're a Threads participant, it's actually at Pick Outreach, PIC, pick like photo for Instagram. So feel free, follow along, give comments, ask questions, that sort of thing as well. Thanks for having me. Um, like Allison said, I'm Ryan Hannon, Community Engagement Officer for Goodwill Northern Michigan, and this is all about case noting. And hopefully, we have lots of attendance here. It must be a great topic. And hopefully, like my friends up in Canada to say, hopefully this training doesn't suck. We hope to be a bit interactive and go through this. So why? I always want to start out with why for case notes. I'm not sure all of what your roles are, but working in the homelessness response system could be street outreach, could be working in a homeless shelter, could be housing-based case manager or a supporting role out peer support or street medicine or something like that. But all of us require data collection. And I have my photo here, one I've been using for many years because as helpers, data collection and documenting may seem um, like a pain in the neck or head here, I guess, banging our head against the wall because we constantly have to do it. But it's so important for what we do. We may have heard for those of you that have had training on case notes or heard from around the office or the boss that if it's not documented, it didn't happen, right? We know what happened. We want our good work to be shown. But one of the things that I kind of remember in my years of outreach is if I don't put it in here, no one's going to see it, right? If we don't kind of share the actual scope of the need and the problem out there, then the decision makers that use this data can't make accurate decisions, and we could actually negatively affect the people we're serving if we don't do this. So hopefully we learned today of ways to make it easier, streamline a bit, and be more efficient. So I start with a street outreach perspective. Street outreach is, for those of you that don't know, a professional response as part of the homeless response system of reaching people who need to be reached in our communities. So I ask, in your communities, do you have a street outreach? And if so, is it an access point in the homelessness response system in your community? And if it is, that makes data collection, data reporting all that much more necessary. And if you think about coordinated entry, right? Access to programs in your community, there may be case notes that need to be shared with other agencies where the client that you're serving or reaching out to will be served or needs to be served. So it's important for that data and those case notes to be there, to be shared so the people that are working with the client know what's going on and can be up to date with the information to be able to serve the client better. Now, there's sharing agreements across your system, and your agency may have specific sharing or not sharing, but the notes that you put in will be read by someone, but we'll get into that a little bit later here. Also, the importance of the prioritization. We all know that there's more people that we can help. We need to prioritize the services and the time as workers in street outreach, in homeless shelters, in housing-based case management when we have too many clients that we can serve. So prioritizing is part of the thing we need to do through our documentation. So some of the case notes you put in may influence the prioritization process. So I have building trust in here because from the outreach perspective and those of you engaging with people in the shelters as well, and then hopefully if you're a housing-based case manager and you have a warm transfer process from an intake person to you, you can hit the ground running with trust and working on housing-based case plans and that sort of thing. But in order to be able to get the data, to get the notes we need to put in there, we have to have trust with our clients, right? And how do we do that? We don't promise anything. We may want to alleviate suffering, but really building trust is about doing what you say you're going to do. In outreach, it's always be on time. People don't realize, people who are experiencing homelessness, they also have lives and deadlines and things they have to do to get their basic needs met. So they're typically not just waiting around for us to come by. So it's important to respect their time and then explain processes. As we document in HMIS or a computer database or whatever it is we're documenting on, it might kind of freak someone out. So it's important to explain the processes so they know what's going on, and then it creates more buy-in. And the non-judgmental, no, really is really just about meeting people where they're at, and respecting choice. So these things can help us build trust with the clients we're serving to be able to get the data we need. That's so important to help their process move along, and also show that greater need to the decision makers that help form our systems, get resources to our system, and then also to advocate for things like housing. So the quality of the data, stuff you'll be putting in your case notes, starts with the relationship, right? Where professionals intervening in people's lives through the response to helping end their homelessness. Um, Quality of data, when we put in data in case notes, especially in outreach, is like location of where people are, how to identify people. You may be in a large city that has multiple street outreaches, and clients oftentimes kind of cross those boundaries of geographic boundaries. So that information that's shared and the information is in there is important. I don't know if you guys have had any experiences where you were trying to house somebody or get them time sensitive paperwork, documentation, or things that need to be done so they don't lose their house. If you can't find them, how kind of devastating that is for the client to not get the need met, but also frustration on your part of, oh, I got this. We've worked so hard and we came this long. Now we can't find the person and they may lose their housing opportunity. Sharing data like that can really help make sure that um, doesn't happen. And then the quality of data. This is another street outreach uh, concept. Uh, Data collection gets better over time. When you have a street outreach, is that's part of your coordinated entry, reaching people that don't reach out to the call center or go to the like housing uh, center where they do the assessments and things. Um, it may take time to build that relationship and start to collect data that you need. Um, Excellent repetitive explanation, reassuring people what the data is used for, uh, why we're doing it, and the importance of sharing can help with your quality. Allison, was there a question?
There was someone asked, what does no really mean? But I don't recall you saying that, so I'm not sure.
Oh, non-judgmental, no, really. So
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
so that had to do with like really being non-judgmental. Sometimes we have to work at it with certain people, but we say it all the time. So I kind of added that emphasis of no, really, like, and that's something that's usually inherent to people, but as we train and learn either through social work schooling or human resources schooling or through our agencies and what we're doing, uh, we start to get used to interviewing people and getting to know them and knowing our biases that may come up. So really working in part of non-judgmental really to me is homelessness is a really difficult thing to experience and go through and horrible things happen. And it may be the client that is presenting to you or you're presenting to them, it may have taken all the kind of will and energy and self talk just to get to that point where you are, say you're the front door of your shelter. So if someone's coming in and they're kind of treated poorly or felt like they were blown off, they may, you know, they may not come back for help. So non-judgmental, no, really, and recognizing what people have gone through out there in the day to get to us is helpful. Some tips for data collection that goes into our case notes. You could use a clipboard, a piece of paper, a device. These days, our phones are wonderful, but also you may have a tablet or a computer. Explain what you're doing. Respect privacy. We say that and we put a lot of parameters in to do that, but you may be in the field. You may be working with somebody in a day drop-in center. You may be in a homeless shelter. You may be in the woods, and there may be other people around. So trying to do your best to respect their privacy. They may say, "What's okay, we can just do here at this table," say at a community meal, or you may have a corner or a separate room in one of those places to do this stuff. But respecting privacy is helpful to get accurate information to put in your case notes to streamline the process for the person you're working with to get out of homelessness. HMIS is the database we use in the homelessness response world. You may not be part of this, or you may be very versed in HMIS, but it's really the database where we share our information. And in that, we have our triage assessments, um, coordinated entry, housing stability assessments. Could be long term, could be a SPADAG, could be a biopsychosocial, whatever it is you're doing goes in there. And then, of course, your program entry, the universal data elements, service transactions, all things you're doing through HMIS, but you may document in your case notes what you've done with a person. So let's say you're a part of a team or a community that's got several outreach workers, or uh, maybe you're short staffed and you have cross training. You have other people working in the housing based case management field. You want to be able to read what's going on with that client so you can seamlessly pick up and help that process go along. Assessment. Nice photo here. It's got the device there. We can do that in real time in places. It's not always over the phone. Call centers are great. They do wonderful things, but you may have to do assessment in places like this as outreach. You may do follow-up assessments. You may be doing this in someone's apartment or home as a housing-based case manager, but it's important to document these things through case notes. Verification of homelessness. This is something that street outreach workers do. You may do it as a shelter provider, a HARA, maybe the Housing Assessment Resource Agency. Documenting these things go into case notes because the implications. So, if someone were to get into a housing program or need a housing program, they may need that verification of homelessness to be able to meet the criteria just to access that program. If we're not documenting that and sharing that information, it could actually be part of the reason why someone doesn't get housed or takes longer to get into housing. Documenting interactions. Something I learned a long time ago through Micah actually was about in our street outreach and documenting their interactions with people. There may be progression of your work with the person. There may be regression of their symptoms of mental health, and you have those in there so we can document the process, not only prove you're doing the work and it maybe have implications towards billing. Uh, I know for us in our outreach, we need to have a document our interactions through a service transaction, a corresponding case note, and then it's tracked also in the time clock. So it's important to keep up on it. But if you don't do that, then you may be not showing all what it takes to end homelessness and not really showing the need and justifying programs. And we know how delicate sometimes program funding can be, especially to top level decision makers that may have differing opinions on how much homelessness should be responded to and in the way it is. So the better we can document that and inform that, the better it is for the people we serve. Operating in community. We may be putting in notes about places that we were, places we visited. Let's say we're going to get into more housing-based case management stuff and that sort of thing in a little bit. I know I'm heavy on street outreach here, but let's say street outreach, maybe you're working with a street medicine team and there's a detrimental situation for a person. So you may be helping to look for that person, or you may kind of have a feeling where they might be, or you're going to keep your eye out for them. So when you're operating in the community, you may document places that you have seen a person or would most likely be. Emergency services. For those of you in outreach, you may do homeless encampment assessments, right? You may count the number of times people go to places like this. Documenting through case notes, information like this can be helpful for coordination of care, information other workers need to know. It may go into their assessment, and it may help, go into that process if you have a SOAR program. Information that you put in there can be helpful. We also have the matching process, right? Coordinated entry. We have people who are experiencing homelessness, and we have housing programs, interventions for people. So we have to do the matching process. Um, that coordinated entry, that whole reason, right, is to get people into housing. We want to give them the highest level of intervention available as housing first. If we're not documenting the need, documenting, verifying homelessness, and putting this stuff in there, then it could be delayed to where they get someone who needs it. I mean, they all need it, but someone who has an opportunity to be matched to a program could be overlooked or missed. Participate and document the process. So it may be in your case note, client is next in line for the housing program, or they're being referred to a permanent housing program, right? That document is in there so people know, and then someone else may need to locate that person to get them to the program that they need. Warm transfer is probably could be a whole nother training, but what it essentially is referring someone to a program and doing it in a way where uh, call it warm. So we interact with as the intake worker or outreach worker and the housing program or the shelter for people that may need it, where we sit down and we explain the process. We talk about things like this is a program that comes with housing. We want to have ongoing empowerment of the client to stay engaged. But really, as intake workers, as outreach workers, as people referring to a housing program, we need to help build legitimacy of the program to the clients we serve. We have to help them get buy-in into the program. That can be hard to do sometimes. But part of that warm transfer is that in the back of your mind, when you're first assessing somebody and they're experiencing homelessness, is how we're going to get them to that final goal. And so that housing focus program with housing is part of that warm transfer. And we go through the domains of the housing assessment and share our rationale with the client and the case manager we're transferring to. All this stuff gets documented in case notes, and the information we put in there is shared with the new worker with permission, of course. But it helps to set the tone for the housing-based program. It informs the expectations, helps the client and the new case manager start going, um, working on stuff right away. And so it's transparent. The client isn't now reliving all the traumatic questions that may have been asked up until this point. They're here, they don't have to do it. They can provide clarification, but it's all part of getting that person into that program. So hanging on here, frequent returns to housing. If someone, we know our permanent supportive housing process, if someone gets into a permanent supportive housing program, then if they get evicted, they still have their um, support, right? They're still part of the program, barring something that happened that totally uh, uh, meets criteria for not being in the program. We want to, when we transfer somebody, help them create that buy-in. It may take a little more, a few times of interacting with your outreach worker and the housing-based case manager. It could be, it could happen just one time really quick. But what we want to do is, I think termination was one of the words on my previous slides. When we're the intake worker or the outreach and we're handing someone off, we want to close their case, right? We want them to go off and be housed and not be homeless anymore. And we don't want to be hanging on unless we have to help with that buy-in and that transfer process, and you'll work together with the housing-based case manager. So all that, hopefully, that helps you get excited about case notes and realize how important it is. So here we have the SOAP note kind of model that can be used. Looks like we have a question, maybe.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure there was a question at the beginning, was asking the details of what you put into the case notes, and I let it go because I figured that would be answered. So I just wanted to give the whoever posed that question, I think it was Wanda, give her a chance to ask again in case the information wasn't clear from your presentation at this point.
Oh, good. We're about to get into that here. Thank you, Wanda, for your question. Feel free to jump in if I don't cover it here. So we think of the SOAP note. We think of SOAP stands for S for subjective, O objective, A assessment, P for plan. So SOAP. And then one thing I want to point out is remember who will or could read your notes, right? Certainly partner agencies with their sharing agreement and permission, but also the client. The client are entitled to read the notes and may do that. So remember when you're writing, keep in mind the end user, but also case notes can be subpoenaed by courts for things like custody things or uh, child protective services, things like that may be subpoenaed. So remember, we want to keep it in this process here where I'll go through. But knowing that can maybe help keep in mind the professionalism of these notes, right? This isn't about gossiping and things like that about clients, which sometimes can happen where we're working with people, right? Where we spend a lot of time in their lives. So it's important to remember our case notes and our process so we keep it professional. So subjective, if you use the SOAP note model, right, you would kind of your first paragraph or sentence or whatever concept would be subjective. Self-reports what the client's reporting of opinions of what may be going on. Now, subjective means our response or our notes are influenced by our perceptions and feelings, right? It's not like totally fact-based. It may be the client's chief complaint, the presenting problem, what you all discussed. So some of that language is therapeutic in nature, but it could be the the client you're working with out in the woods is telling you how uh, maybe it's something medical going on and their chief complaint. You came to meet with them to work on a housing plan, and they're talking to you about um, maybe the bandages of their wounds are all dirty and bloody, and you're kind of getting off the topic you need to be there for. But that is an issue that may need to be addressed, and documenting that can be very helpful in this subjective section. Now we think of the objective to be measurable, observable, factual, appearance, mood, and location. So in outreach, it's important to document where people are, where we can refine them. Uh, their appearance and how they appear may be important for things like a SOAR case, which is Social Security Disability Application. You also may be observing safety of an encampment, things that are facts, objective based. And then assessment, you're assessing risk, you may be doing triage, a housing assessment, and keeping track of your progress with the client in this sort of section of the S.O.A.P note. And then plan for what action you will work with the client on based on some of the assessments or what you've done prior. You also may document the next step, what you will do when you meet again, when you will come back to see them. You may have ongoing meetings with your client. If you're a housing-based case manager in their place, it might be a standing meeting, or it may be an outreach where you got to go back and say, fetch a birth certificate application or something. You may not have that with you right then, or maybe the client is kind of just done engaging with you at this time, but you want to tell them, okay, I'll be back tomorrow at 9. Does that work for you? Or what time will work for you? And then document that here. And then what the goals and the progress of the goals are. There's also the 5 W's kind of concept: what, when, where, why, and who. So let's say we have a scenario. Well, let's say it's a situation you're in a homeless shelter. Allison, looks like you have a question. Oh, I can't hear you.
Yeah, it'd help if I unmuted. Someone is asking, should these actions be discussed and signed off by the client?
Oh, yes, definitely. It's a collaborative effort. So you're working with the client on the actions that you're doing. So let me go back. Meaning like this here, the action you guys will take. You may agree. Maybe someone is they're upset at the government, right? Maybe they believe the government caused them to be homeless, and so they are not going to fill out any government paperwork, right? So you may talk about that, try to reassure them and help to create buy-in, and then the client might say, okay, Ryan, you know what? That doesn't sound so bad. You're right. This resource is in our community for people like me, and I'm going to take advantage of it. And so we may plan to complete an application for a housing choice voucher, but that's not something we would just do on our own. We would need client buy-in for sure. Does that answer your question?
We will see. Someone's asking if you can go back to the assessment slide for a moment.
Sure.
Was there a question, Jessica, or did you just want to see it? The notes were posted again in the chat. Okay, so they're asking what the someone wants to know what the S means again as well.
Oh, subjective. So subjective is interpretation, right? The client self-reports. They may say, I have $100,000 in the bank, so I don't need your help. Wanda.
I will unmute you, Wanda.
Hi, hello, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah. Hi, Wanda.
No, ma'am, hold on for a minute. Yes, my name is Melanie Rogers, and I'm just typing on Wanda's email, but it's me that's answering these questions. And I just want to be cure. I mean, I just want to go over the S one more time and like another example of case management using the subjective terminology. Can you put me back on mute, please?
You are muted.
Sure. So I think an example could be, let's say you're a housing-based case manager and you're there to meet for your housing-based case management time, and the client is describing to you their interpretation of, say, the loud noise and activity of the neighbor above them. They're reporting to you what they're hearing. To them, that may be objective, but it's a self-report to you. It also may be, they may be giving their opinions, like the client upstairs is doesn't like me, so they're always making noise. They're always playing their music loud. So that would be things you could put in the subjective is what the client is reporting to you. And then that could be something that's discussed with the client and how to respond to that in the housing-based case manager platform or process the agency has, or the training will dictate kind of how that process may go. But that may be something you put in the subjective portion of your SOAP note.
So Ryan, if I may, so what that might look like is if when you're writing it, it might say something like client reports neighbor bangs on wall at 2 a.m. Right? As opposed to writing something like the neighbors next door are super loud and disturbing the client. You would just actually write what they reported to you, if that's helpful.
Good.
I think we're good on questions for now.
Here we are, the 5 W's. So the scenario I had in mind to talk about, and you guys may throw one out there, but say at a homeless shelter, maybe there's an incident that happened. Now you got to document it, right? You want to know what happened, when it happened, where it happened, why it happened, and who was involved. So let's say there was a TV lounge. More questions, Allison?
Yep. I was gonna just answer it, but I thought it was good for the group. Someone's asking if it would make sense when they're doing their notes to actually spell SOAP and put each one next to it. I have done that. I've directed folks to do it in the past. Didn't know if you had an opinion.
Yeah, that's a good way to do it. And then maybe you do that in the beginning, then after time, you don't have to do it. It's just natural, or it can be easy for the person reading it as well. So yeah, that could be a really good way to keep the structure. On this scenario, let's say you're working in the homeless shelter and you have an incident where 2 clients are fighting over the TV in the TV lounge, if your shelter has something like that. That's a fairly common thing, right? What to watch. So you go to intervene. See, people are escalated, they're yelling, and you intervene and are able to call for help because there's 2 people and they're yelling at each other, and you're able to help them get separated and calm down in different areas. So you might talk about what happened. That way, other workers on the next shift or a few days later, they may read this scenario, know what happened, and so they can keep an eye out for what may happen again. When it happened, because you may be reviewing and looking for patterns. Maybe there's a pattern of one person fighting over the TV, say a certain time of night, or it's after dinner, or after going out and consuming alcohol or whatever it is. Looking for patterns. Where it happened is important. Documenting in the men's lounge, we'll say, and then kind of where the workers took the other people to separate them. And when I say took, it's like a verbal intervention. Let's say it's me, I'm the client, I'm yelling at my shelter mate there, and the worker comes up, hey Ryan, why don't you come over here and we'll talk about this, or come over here and we can talk about this. So you're trying to help that person get away from that area to de-escalate. So you would document that, and then document why it happened. That's important information. it happened because, let's say I'm explaining to you, the worker, well, me and Allison agreed that at 6 o'clock I can watch Jeopardy. But now she's saying I can't. Right? Just documenting so people know what happened, where, why, and then who's involved. It's a good kind of structure to put it in. Oh, there we go. Questions clear as mud. That was kind of quick. Does anybody have any other scenarios?
Looks like we have someone requesting an example of an objective comment or situation.
Okay, so an objective situation. Location's an easy one, but let's say measurable. So let's say you're a street outreach worker and you came and you met with the client. We want to keep, what I keep in mind that helps me is objective based interactions. I'm coming along to their location where they're at for a purpose, right? It may be to check on them, certainly, but let's say I have a process I need to complete. Let's use verification of homelessness. So your note, the objective portion could be writer, or however you stated, worker, writer, met with client at their sleeping location at the park bench on the corner of Cass and Front Street. We completed, I verified their homelessness and sent the verification of homelessness letter to the HARA to meet their criteria to keep their place on the wait list for the housing choice voucher. So you may not put in to keep their wait list on the housing choice voucher. You may just say, I sent the verification of homelessness to the HARA. That would be objective, right? That was objective based, documenting what you did. That way, let's say then the next week, the client calls your boss and says, I haven't heard from my outreach worker ever. I haven't seen them in months, and I know I'm going to be up for a recertification for my housing choice voucher, but I want to file a complaint, right? And they certainly can do that. But then your boss comes and say, hey, what's up with this, right? And you're like, well, yeah, I know that Allison is upset because housing's taking so long. That's understandable. But I did do it, and here's my documentation that I did. Yeah, certainly protecting our own situation is important, but that's one of the benefits of these objective case notes. But also, it's proof. It shows what you did as the worker, and then it proves and shows. Let's say you have a big community, right? You have lots of outreach workers, and they're following up. Hey, so and so still on the list. Someone may look and see it, and then they just know what's going on. Is that helpful?
Okay, then we had a couple more questions here. She did say that that was helpful. And then what would it look like if the client passed away?
Well, yeah, that's certainly one of the hardest ones that we ever have to write, but it may just be client passed away, closed the case file. That's a hard one. Subjective client, and you have to go through your closeout of your program process, right? I'm not sure what program the person asked the question is in, but it may be you're closing, you're exiting the program, and you have to click the boxes of where they went and that sort of thing. And you do that, but then you kind of just mention that the client has passed on in closing the HMIS program entry or program exit complete. That's what I would write. We could do a scenario of a housing-based case management, let's say. You're working with a client. Let's say they've been housed for about 3 months now. They're kind of settled. They have the things that they need, and you work through their help them develop a plan that they want to work on based on the choice of the things that they need to work on. And let's say they decided when they moved in, like they had a severe problem with drinking alcohol. And they moved in, and the first couple of months, they were anxious because they didn't think it was actually true that this situation is going to stick around, or they're wondering how long until they screw it up, and that sort of thing. So they're anxious, they're drinking a lot, but now they've settled down a bit. They start to realize, oh, this is my place, and they want to work on reducing their drinking, or going to, say, a substance abuse treatment to help stop drinking. So you come in, you're coming in for your appointment that you have, and you say something like, okay, last time we met, you said you wanted to work on accessing treatment. And then you go through the process to access that. So you would document client expressed desire to seek alcohol treatment. Writer and client called the treatment center. The client did a intake assessment for the treatment, and they'll be going to, ours is called Dukoski Hall on Friday at 3 p.m. We talked with the client, and they said, yep, agreed, I can do that, but I'm a little nervous. Ryan, will you help me get there? Okay, then you document client's going to go to Dukoski Hall at 3 p.m. Writer agreed to meet client at apartment at 2:45 and transport client to Dukoski Hall. Then you may have another case note where you actually did that, right? You say followed up client, writer met client at apartment, writer transported client to Dukoski Hall, writer communicated with the intake staff at the treatment center, and with the client's permission, gave my information to keep updated on the process and how I can support. Something like that.
Okay, we had a couple more questions here. Penny says, I have difficult time keeping case notes shorter. Any suggestions with an example of a statement saying that the client stated her abuser knocked down her door and the police were called? Anything around keeping them short and brief, but making sure to keep all the information in?
I think typing exactly just what you said. Client reported or client stated, just type that. And you may add, okay, objective, if you did something like help that person access care for that. Writer and client reached out or called the domestic violence program, and appointment was set for Thursday at 3. Client will attend the assessment on Zoom or something like that.
And what about the use of abbreviations within notes to help keep them short?
Abbreviations could be misinterpreted to the reader, so it's unfortunate, but we got to spell out all the acronyms.
Okay, next question here is, oh, go ahead, sorry.
I wanted to add in the in the kind of mundane like HCV, I would abbreviate HCV, housing choice voucher.
Okay. Next question. Do you have an example of a form that can be used for case management or a resource to get one from?
Oh, well, I have to admit I'm not the expert on this because I don't do the direct service currently, but there's in HMIS, I believe there's a process where you could use for case plan built right in, or there's you could use a template like this, like SOAP, but ask the question again, Eric. I lost my train of thought.
Hold on one moment. I sent it to the
They're asking for like
answer
a
pile.
template, so we don't have a template necessarily to share today, but if you did start researching this, what you'll find is a lot of stuff like the SOAP notes. So if you search SOAP notes, if you're looking for like some examples of written notes, you'll probably find some more there if that's what you're looking for. But this is a template, the SOAP note. And then the W's that Ryan did as well is also a template. But if you're looking for examples, I would maybe search that. If
Yeah,
that's helpful.
there may be specific, especially housing-based case management kind of templates for what they're looking for. But like Allison said, you should be able to find it online easy.
Okay. We have a few questions here that were by anonymous users and other users that are a little hard to interpret. So there are just some pieces. If they can put in further questions here, it would be a little bit more helpful. We have a question from an anonymous user. Is it best to speak of yourself as writer versus case manager?
That's nuance. It could be whatever you prefer or whatever agency states. You could say case manager, writer, worker, outreach worker, shelter work, whatever. Yeah, it it could be preference, or your agency might have specific things they want.
Okay. What would a note for a walk-in intake look like? I have trouble wondering how deep to take those notes, specifically when there's a client in a very bad situation.
Yeah, certainly like the actual work you're doing and de-escalating or helping with a crisis, you're going to go through and do that. You may have not even get to the intake, right? But it may be what happened where client presented for intake, client at 3 p.m. at the intake center for shelter. Client stated they were assaulted on the way here or something like that. Whatever it is, you can be brief. You're not the therapist here doing deep therapy where you're case noting that, but it could just be the scenario and what happened. The assessments are more where you'll get into more kind of sensitive information, and they may be shared. Like for example, we use the SPDAT, right? And so we complete the SPDAT, and there's a special place for that criteria, rationale for meeting the criteria that you're putting in a different location. It's kind of like a case note, but the case note in the database that you're sharing with the large group may be SPDAT completed score 56 or whatever it is. Writer met with client at the park bench on Casson, the corner of Casson Front Street, full SPDAT completed, score 56, referral sent to coordinating entry or whatever. Is that helpful?
Ken, if that is not, if you need more clarification, raise your hand and we can have you unmute, or you can submit another question within there. For now, we'll move on. There's another question about the presentation being mailed out. Yes, I will. It's in the chat right now, but I will send out another copy. And then we have a Carlina raising her hand. Carlina, I am going to allow you to talk. And Carlina, you'll need to unmute yourself. Okay, we will move on for the moment. There was a question in the chat from Amanda. Should case notes ever be formatted like this one's difficult. Ryan, do you have access to the chat right now?
Yeah.
It'll be more helpful if you read it than me trying to state
Sure.
it.
Where do I find it? Here.
Scroll all the way down. It's the third comment from the bottom from Amanda.
I don't see.
So they're
Oh,
asking, they're
I'm in
saying
the
that
question and answers. Okay.
their
Chat.
understanding is that case notes should be formatted like a statement. Clients reports monthly income is $350 from SSI and food stamps each month is $215, as opposed to kind of doing like a list where you just list the types of help that they might get. So it would like say DHHS and you say no, income $350, food stamps no. So like where you list types that people might get, and that is saying, you know, what the amount is or if they receive it or not, as opposed to writing a full statement.
Well, I do think it depends what program and agency and what supervisors say. It could be and depending on what information who needs to see it. So if you have like a template where you have all these things that are needed, you could type it in less of a sentence type way. But I would put like, if it does say income 350, I would list what that income would be. Because my experience with outreach, like that, all that information is in the program entry portion. So myself, I probably wouldn't put any of that into a case note as street outreach, but it may be more beneficial for housing-based case management.
I was thinking the same thing, like that. I wouldn't feel like that would really be a case note. That would be more like an intake form or assessment, because your case notes would still need to cover like what the person reported, what you observed, which is not a checklist.
Yeah, so the case note might be like case manager, writer met with client at intake room at the local homeless shelter, intake completed. And then all that information would be in that intake assessment.
Then we have, should all case notes be placed in HMIS regardless of other note-taking systems? And that's probably, you would need to find out where your agency wants your notes. So, because your boss would need to know where to look them up if they needed them, or your coworker or your partner agency. So hopefully they would all be in the same place.
And seek guidance from your supervisor. There may be a reason for the certain location. And the sharing agreement has like ramifications for that, because we had like our homeless shelter has they use case note section HMIS and client notes. So case notes may be more for nuanced things that happen at the shelter, but all the relevant information that the system needs to see is put in the client note shared portion, which our outreach and housing-based case management use those.
Okay. Question here, is it okay to use initials of another client in a note?
I mean, it's a good way to kind of preserve confidentiality, but it's still, my experience is no, not to mention that the other person in any way other than saying another client or something like that.
Okay. Can you elaborate on who and when SPDATs and V-SPDATs are needed?
That may be different per
Yeah.
agency or COC.
Okay.
And
Then
just
I will
as a
handle
rem-
the other part of that question for AmeriCorps members.
Go ahead, Allison.
Oh, I was just gonna say, and as a reminder, like I know places are still using the VI SPDAT, but the creators org code no longer support that, and the state no longer requires it. And we're looking into a new prioritization system, so you may still use it at your agency, but it's not an across the board thing anymore. And then for the full SPDAT, you would need to be trained on that as well. So hopefully you would know if you were required to use that, because you would need an extensive training on it. I think we got them all. There's some like comments in the chat. If you want, I can read those. Otherwise, we can just keep going.
I don't have any other material.
Okay, so let's just see if you have thoughts, and then if not, we'll just take more questions. Oh, I forgot you were in clear as mud. Okay, so someone added in the chat, the SOAP note should be the most detailed note done at intake, details about the patient's chief complaint, history of present illnesses, medical and family history, and any relevant social or environmental factors, etc. Every note that follows should be what occurred at that interaction. All notes will not be as long as the initial note. And so I would say that's can be the case, but like from my experience when doing housing-based case management, I did a SOAP note every time I did the interaction to kind of keep me on track, and make sure I was reporting everything that was happening.
And that SOAP note may be shorter going forward, but still a SOAP note, right? But I wanted to reiterate the intake process, especially for like street outreach. It may not be a whole lot of information coming up front. It may be a series of working to engage and over time pieces of intake information.